Hi, thanks for coming to this talk. Um, Before I really get started, there's just a small thing I want to address before we really get into the meat of this thing, because this talk is a little bit different from the sort of talk that I generally do, since those are generally technical talks. This talk is about as non-technical as it comes for me, which is a nice break of things, because, you know, trying to convey technical things to a large audience is sometimes difficult. The talk is going to be both a little bit funny and a little bit serious, and we'll see how it goes. So, to give you a little bit of background of what this talk is really about, is we were contacted by a customer of ours, a big financial institution on Wall Street, and they had been made aware from a security vendor that they had some sort of APT. Has anybody heard the term APT before? Okay, so a few of you. The term APT stands for Advanced Persistent Threat. You might have heard about that. APT generally will be synonymous with what you refer to as a nation-state actor. That is to say that you might, for instance, have heard about, like, oh, China is attacking the US or whatever, trying to steal whatever. That's generally what's sort of implied by APT. The more general definition is that an APT is a threat actor that is technically advanced. They have technical capabilities that sort of exceed most other people. And they are persistent in trying to get in. They won't just try once and then give up. They'll generally have a very extended sort of time span of operation and try and very silently, penetrate a network and persist in it for years at a time. So APT has really become, I would say, it's become a little bit of the boogeyman in recent years. A lot of security vendors will put out reports about this advanced persistent threat that they have experienced, and that way try and sell their services. And one of the motivations behind this, because it's a little bit to try and show how that sometimes doesn't work. Of course, Syndis being a security company, this may not be in our best interest, because if we can scare everybody and sell more things, that would be great for us. But in reality, it's one of those things that I personally, at least, also find to be not that great. Trying to scare customers is really a bad practice, I find. So that's also one of the motivations behind this, trying to counteract that a little bit. So this customer we were just talking about, they got this report from a security vendor, and there was some evidence for some sort of attack, one of their machines having been infected, and it listed some indicators that were used to determine that they had been breached. The most important thing that needs to be noted here is there is a domain that was listed in the report. And we have censored it out a little bit because some of this information could be used to track back things and expose our client. The client has very kindly agreed that we can do this presentation as long as we kept names out. And we thought that would be worth it. So I want you to keep in mind 080. That one is going to come in repeatedly throughout the presentation. It's going to be very important. So we got this report, and we saw, APT report. We were so excited because generally, like, these are really good when it's from one of the really big vendors. A lot of interesting information. But as we sort of started reading through this, we realized, wait, there's something odd about this. This doesn't really seem to be all that advanced. For one, the technical analysis was really not that great. Second of all, some of the, for instance, like screenshots they included in it, it was something that we kind of had seen before. In fact, just a couple of months prior, Palo Alto had put out some really good research about this specific type of malware. It's called Keybase. So we're like, wait, is this vendor saying that this thing, which has been well documented by a big vendor, is actually APT. That really doesn't make sense. So, yeah. So before we then start going into what we actually did following that, a few more disclaimers. As I said, we censored out everything we could. There's going to be some things throughout the presentation that might seem like you may be skirting a little bit on a line that maybe invades a little bit of privacy. I can assure you that we did everything within the law. We did not compromise any personal data. We made very sure not to do that. And we have censored everything out that could be personally identifiable. So with that said, let's get going. So Keybase, I mentioned. This was the malware that was in the report that we saw. We already found the Palo Alto blog where they described this piece of malware. And just to summarize a little bit of what Keybase is that it is a piece of malware that you can buy on a very popular forum on the internet where what we like to call script kiddies sort of hang out. It's people who do attacks that are not necessarily very technically inclined, but they can buy sort of ready-made solutions to do the job for them. And then, in this case, Keybase was sold for just $50 in this forum. Incidentally, because it's so cheap, you can also just find sort of a pirated version, ironically, of the software on the internet. And it may or may not have one or more backdoors in it, which is not great. A backdoor and a backdoor into other people's machines. That's kind of silly. And it also contains a number of vulnerabilities, which I hope are intentional, because they're kind of, we're not going to go into the complete technical details of them, but they clearly show that the guy who wrote it don't really know about security. Again, ironic. One of the backdoors you might find in it is this thing here that we found. Obviously, if you look at this code, it makes no sense. That's because it's a backdoor. It's not meant to make sense. There's also this one that you can find. Again, this one we found in like 90% of the instances we could find of this pirated version. And most of them seem to be pirated, not many originals. The software also comes with default credentials, which is very nice. In this case, you might see, for instance, that the username is Keybase, and the password is logs123!! And for some reason, people don't change them either. Palo Alto has already documented vulnerabilities in this. One of them is the way that the malware uploads an image to the server is not very secure. You can basically upload any type of file to any directory on the server. It does no validation of it. So you can just upload another backdoor into the malware controlling command center effectively. Not the best thing. Another kind of vulnerability, more design flaw, is that all of the images that are uploaded into a directory on the web server. And if you go to that directory, what you're met with is a nice little PHP script that somebody from a site called firedev.com wrote, which just gives you like a small gallery of all the pictures. And that thing does not require any authentication. So anybody can go to any command and control server and just look at a full gallery of all of the screenshots taken by this malware, which is how we actually got all the data that we're going to show you today. So what we have found so far is this very inexpensive piece of malware that is used for different attacks, actually quite a few. It contains several vulnerabilities. Most of the installations will contain a backdoor or two, which was put in there by somebody evil. And it contains default passwords that people, for some reason, don't change. So when we started really looking into this command and control server that we had become aware of from our customer, we figured, let's look at it. And of course, what we already described in terms of all of the images being uploaded to this web server without authentication, you may expect, for instance, we could see the image of our customer's infected workstation sort of the moment that they got infected. So we could see how they got infected, the email that they opened with the executable, this sort of stuff. But there was something else that was really weird to us when we started going through it. There was this machine there was a lot of images of. And some of the things we saw on them really made no sense to us. For instance, this picture here, and again, I want to stress, we took out everything that's personally identifiable. What you're seeing here is somebody, they have a page on Yahoo. They have some sort of mass emailing program. You may also notice in the top here, they have their Gmail open. And one of the things you might notice is the email contains 080. Going back to some of the first slides, we might remember that the command and control domain contains 080. So now we're kind of curious. Why is this machine not only sending out emails with a mass emailing thing, but why do they also have an email that seems to correlate with the command and control domain? So we went through a little bit more of the pictures on there. The next one we saw was this one. It's a site, well, it used to be called refut.me. And it is a little bit like the reverse of if you heard about like VirusTotal. VirusTotal, you can upload a file, you can see if it's malware. With this service, you used to be able to upload a file, and it would do things to it so that it wouldn't be detected by antivirus and VirusTotal. So sort of hide files, not be as easily detectable by antivirus. And then we're seeing here that this guy is uploading some executables to sort of be packaged to avoid antivirus, which is obviously not a very normal thing to do. In fact, this website was shut down in September last year by several law enforcement agencies because this was literally just used for criminal activity. So that was a good indicator that this wasn't quite right. This was probably not a good person we were looking at. The next thing we saw is this guy was going to a website called SMTP Zone. And what we're seeing here is that this guy was buying credentials for mail servers so that he could send out spam. And you can see he bought quite a few different, accounts for different mail servers, probably ones that had been hacked already, so that he could send out a spam. And another thing to note on this slide is in this one, he's also got a Yahoo mailbox open. Again, it ends in 080. So now we are even more curious, like, what the hell is going on? And of course, he's got the Gmail, again, still open. It's not looking good for him. And also, the username he's logged in with is, again, it contains 00. There's 3 different usernames he uses throughout these, but they're very consistent throughout it. The next thing we see is this Excel document. And this one is really funny. This is an Excel document of several thousand top executives in Iran. So that's kind of odd. Why would you need a list of top executives in Iran? Well, next thing we see, he's sending out a lot of emails. And in this case, you can see that he's attached some attachments. Some of them being related to like, oh, here's a bank transfer for you. We've sent you some money, just open this invoice and you'll get information. And we saw several times that it actually worked. Surprisingly enough, people did fall for it, even though it's kind of a very naive way of doing it. Just sending an executable piece of malware, it's like, just run me and be infected. But most people don't realize that that's what's happening. And in this case, on this screen, we also see that we see almost the full email like listing of the different emails that he's got in his inbox. And there's going to be some interesting things we'll find there. But at this point, we're pretty sure that there's something up here. We were pretty sure that this guy he's up to no good. So now we really wanted to figure out what the hell is he doing. So we started, just going around a little bit, taking some of the emails that he used, putting them into Google, seeing what comes up. If you put in just his username, for instance, we land on a website that's like a forum in Nigeria, and he's looking to like tutor people in like sciences. We even have his phone number and email address in there, so we could call this guy now. But obviously, a teacher of some sort, why would he do this sort of stuff? So maybe we got the wrong person. We found another screenshot from the command and control server, which contained a full picture of his mailbox. And in this case, there's some really interesting things to note that sort of led us down the path towards where we actually sort of ended up. There's two different mails in here that you'll notice. Well, I've blurred out some of it, sorry. One of them is that there's an email from a company name. It's a travel company. That was kind of interesting. I don't think this guy travels a lot. And then there's a Facebook name of a person that tagged him in a post. So the first thing we did was, okay, maybe if we look at the profile of this person who tagged him in a post, maybe we can look at the list of friends of that person and narrow down who it could be, because everybody is on, well, most people are on Facebook. So we put in the name, and we got this profile. And what you might notice is that there's some travel-related stuff, like the first image here seems potentially travel-related. We go and look through the post that this person made, and we go, wait a minute, this person is just posting about like different travel packages. And we figure, wait, but we're pretty sure that the person we're looking for is a male because some of the email addresses had like male names in them. So we look a little bit further into it, and one of a little interesting, fact. What do you think happens if you put an email address into the search bar on Google and hit enter? Any ideas? Any good ideas? Dumb ideas? Well, what happens, and this is one of the mails he used, is that when you click enter, you land on a profile. It literally just looks up the email you put in, and if it finds the account associated with that, it will give you the profile. And in this case, we see a person, and the person looks strangely similar to this guy and this guy. If you then look at his profile, you see that he's the CEO of a travel company. And in some of the pictures, you also see his wife, which is her. So we just found the actual guy who did this, and his whole family and the company that he runs. So now we figured out who the hell did it. I was like, great. That was fun. Of course, this is a person in Nigeria. Nigeria is strangely known for not being the most trustworthy people when they contact you. So we figured it was kind of obvious. We did go through a little bit further and found some references to previously published reports where this guy actually shows up in some lists of known bad actors. So we were like, yeah, case closed. There's no way that even if this guy had done any damage that you could potentially like prosecute him because he's in Nigeria, far away, and no damage was done, so it really wasn't worth it. So that was really like the sort of the analytical part of this. That was kind of fun, actually being able to take a report that was labeled as a APT attack and go through and actually figure out who the hell did it. Now, the point of this whole talk is not necessarily to be funny and pointing out that some random guy attacked a customer of ours. There is a more serious sort of aspect to this. And it is really that, when you hear about APT, you hear about China attacking the US, you hear about nation-state actors attacking each other. Yeah, that's all happening. Like, there's no doubt about that. We have seen that several times. But in some cases, when you hear about it, maybe take it with a grain of salt, especially if it comes from a company that has an inherent financial interest to actually scare you. They don't always have the best interest in mind for you. And in this case, the customer that we sort of did this work for, it was a large financial institution on Wall Street. They spent a lot of money on security. And even then, despite all the bells and whistles that you can buy, somehow this very non-sophisticated attack is like one of the most simplest attacks that you can do. It worked against them. And we saw many different other people that were affected by just this one guy. And it is possible to go out and find all other examples of other people being affected by this on a large scale. Because really, when you're talking about like phishing, it tends to become, other than in the cases where it's very targeted, it becomes a question of numbers. Just like when Microsoft support calls you up and says, hello, there's an error with your Windows, we need to go and fix it, and you pay us money. They call maybe 1,000 people a day, one of them falls for it, and that's a week made. It's just like the same thing with this. Sending out thousands of emails to Iranian top executives, 2 of them bites, and it's a jackpot. And if even a big financial institution that throws lots and like more than the average European company will throw at it, or even Icelandic throws at it, if they can't defend against even this very simply, well, anybody could be affected by this. So it's a little bit of talking about APT and trying to defend against it, it becomes, at least for us, it becomes a little bit of a double-edged sword, unfortunately, because on one hand, you have the ability to sometimes, as some vendors do, scare people into trying to solve a problem that it does exist. But there's also the other hand that sometimes that's not necessarily the best thing for a company to do. You're not solving the right problem. In this case, just not allowing executables going through the mail server would have protected against this. So, spending your money wisely and not just listening to the hype about APT and China and all this sort of stuff and Russia, not the right way to go about it. And in some cases, an attacker is so dumb that they infect their own machine with malware, and then you have a lot of fun. So that's it. Any questions? Yep.
You talked about that other companies might make money off such an API report that are nothing. Why are you the good guy? Why are you anything different? Why is your company anything different?
That's a very hard question. In reality, every single corporation is a bunch of people. I don't inherently believe that the big people who push APT are bad people. But there's a very fine line in terms of when you are discussing threats, whether or not you are discussing a threat that's actually applicable to the organization and the solution that you have, whether or not that is really in the best interest of that company or not. One of the things that we like to do is really, when we engage with a new customer, is start from the ground up. Take the lowest hanging fruit and build up. We're not selling like the defending against China thing. That's not what we do. Most companies, there are some low hanging fruit that can be done. And that's what we like to focus on, because most people need that. And one of the things we don't do is we don't do a lot of direct marketing. People reach out to us. I don't think that actually we've done any reaching out to people explicitly and got customers for that. It's always people reaching out to us. But we're just as valuable as anybody else. We're no saints. I don't think anybody is. Any other questions? Yep. I can't discuss that. Any more questions? Yep.
What was the indication this was going on?
I believe that the company had found the command and control server, and then I forget exactly, but I believe that was what it was. I can't be 100% sure. I don't remember. Yep.
Why did the security vendor flag the breach as APT?
Why? I don't know. I mean, that's really like the big question that we had. Why are they calling this an APT? Because it resembles nothing of an APT. I mean, you can do all the fancy like anti-virtualization and anti-debugging things in your malware, and just because you have some fancy anti-detection and this sort of stuff in your malware doesn't make it APT. But unfortunately, some people think that because they don't realize that most malware does this. So I mean, it could really just be a case of not having seen enough malware, I guess, because I mean, if you look at like even the cheap malware, like this stuff you can buy for $50. Yeah, it can be very technically well built. It does a lot of neat, like low-level things to sort of circumvent things in Windows, but it doesn't make it advanced most of the time. I mean, I think like really the litmus test for APT is whether or not it's trivially found and how long time it's been going on, and also trying to imply motivation. Like for instance, when you talk about most of the APT that's published, you're talking about like nation-state actors with a inherent like either financial or intellectual property, something like that, motivation. If you can't somehow imply that from your analysis, then I think you're losing a very large part of sort of the APT indicators in it. And then it's nearly impossible to call it APT. And just because it calls back to China doesn't mean it's APT either. Some people make that mistake, weirdly. Any more questions? Nope. Then I think we're done.